Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Podcast with NBA shooting coach Dave Love and your host, Matt Robertson. Exploring the cutting edge of evidence-based shooting development in basketball today. From shooting form to skill acquisition to shot metrics. This is the Coach Dave Love Podcast.
Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Robertson, and with me, as always, NBA shooting coach Dave Love. Dave, how were your clinics this week?
Clinics were actually awesome. I had 2 half-day clinics with the North Toronto Huskies on Saturday, and then one little bit longer clinic in Kingston, Ontario with the Kingston Impact. And both groups were really good. The Kingston group in particular, shout out to them. One of the coaches listened to the podcast. Just generally like happy, hardworking, smart, funny kids that like just a joy to spend 4.5 hours with.
And I think all sold out. Is that right?
Yeah. We cap each clinic depending on the size of the gym and the number of the rooms. These ones were each capped at 48, and so we had 3 groups of 48 people, and I think we had one had to cancel, so technically one short of a sellout if we're gonna get really, really picky. But 141 for 142. No, it's gotta be 143 for 144, I guess.
Math checks out, I think.
Yeah. Pretty solid, I would say. So what's going on with you? You've been feeling like a bag of hammers, I hear.
Yeah, tough weekend. Just body couldn't decide which end it wanted to use, and then it decided after 2 days. So woo! You can edit that out if you want to. But I'm back on the upswing, and back in action here, Dave. Thanks for asking.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm gonna move on because that's gross.
Sorry for everyone. Apologies to the listener. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, no, we're good at staying in. We don't really edit. I think we've edited like 2 things in all the podcasts. We took out one thing just because the player situation changed, and we didn't want him to kind of regret what he had said about something. And then what was the other? I feel like we edited one other thing.
Yeah, I made a mistake, and then I was like, "Oh, and we're editing this out," and made a 6-second ordeal of it, and then we went back to it. So I'll own that one. However, personal grossness aside, we'll keep this rolling, eh?
Yeah, we make mistakes, and we admit to them, and we don't claim to know everything about everything. And you shouldn't feel like you have to know everything about everything either, dear listener. We're all just trying to get better. And I like that about our podcast, Matthew.
We are all just trying to get better. What an ethos for life, man. Okay, let's jump right into the topic for today, Dave. So this is kind of a thought just based on watching a bunch of people in clinics for the last, 4 days here. What and what not to do with the shooting hand? Give me a little intro on the subject here.
Yeah, I think there's so much information out there right now, and I go through this myself. There's a feeling amongst a lot of coaches where like the more I know, the better, and the more therefore the more I should share. And I think like we end up really paying attention to a lot of things that we don't necessarily need to be paying a lot of attention to. And then we sometimes miss the things that we should. And so I was trying to think, we've done quite a few sciencey, high level podcasts that might not appeal to the average coach. We've done a few of those in a row. So let's get back to the roots a little bit more on this one and just talk about some of the habits that I see within players' shooting hands and things that maybe I see coaches focusing a little bit too much on or worrying too much about, or things that they're not worrying enough about.
Okay. No, I really love that. And this is such a good practical. I did have an experience in the wild recently where Shout out Coach Sharp locally here. He was like, "Hey, love the pod. Just really love the technical episodes." I was like, "Oh, we haven't done many of those lately, but we have one today." So, Dave, let's do the first what not to do.
Okay, so the first what not, don't squeeze or palm the basketball. I don't want shooters to be applying excessive force. It's not, the tighter you can hold the basketball, the better. Which a lot of these first few are going to be sort of, one end of the spectrum is the what not to do, and the other end is the what to do. So it leads me right into, I would like a relaxed, passive hand. And I always try and talk about, like, make the shape of the basketball and keep the shape of the basketball, and that you're not trying to squeeze. And let's go with the old Kevin Costner Bull Durham reference that, oh, you haven't even seen it, you jerk. Hold it like an egg is the line from Bull Durham. And so good advice here, even in basketball, like, make the shape of the basketball, hold it passively, like you're not actively squeezing the ball.
So when you say squeezing, you're talking about the tension in my thumb, tension in my pinky, and really just trying to palm the basketball from a full-on effort perspective.
Yeah, I had a player at the NBA level that massive hands, big hands, and I asked him one day, as we're starting to get to know each other, I said, like, I'm looking at your fingernails, and your fingernails are white, and your skin tone is not a light skin tone. How hard are you squeezing the ball? If like 0 is there's no pressure at all, and 10 is I'm trying to pop the basketball, what kind of a number are you hitting? And he says, I don't know, like a 7 or an 8. I'm like, oh, okay. I feel like we should be more around a 2. And so I just feel like you don't, if you're applying pressure to the ball, then you're impacting the sort of the funneling mechanism that occurs in the wrist snap. And it could go just fine if you apply exactly even pressure with all the fingers, but it can go dramatically wrong if one side of the hand starts applying a lot more pressure at any given point in the release.
Can you just clarify that funneling mechanism just really quick that you mentioned?
Thank you. You're so good. So here's the weird analogy that I always give, and we may have talked about this on the podcast, but we haven't talked about it in a while. I guarantee you had these things in elementary school. You remember the yellow scoop that would have a wiffle ball with it?
Yes.
And you would, like, it was sort of, a scoop is all. Yeah, exactly. Just Google yellow wiffle ball scoop if you don't know what I'm talking about. And then I can almost guarantee, if you haven't figured it out already, you're going to look at the picture that comes up and you're going to go, oh, yeah, we had those in our elementary school. Because I've asked just about every player, like people born in the Congo, people born in Australia, you know those scoops? And they all go, yeah, we had those. That's essentially what your hand is doing. Like that wiffle or that scoop was the same size as the wiffle ball, or just like wrapped around it, didn't squeeze it in any way. But as you flicked the scoop, it guided the ball on the course. And that's essentially the funneling motion, that each side of the scoop would be pushing against the other side and guiding the ball towards the middle of the end, just like a water slide. When a kid goes down a water slide, it's a beautiful self-correcting mechanism where if the kid gets in danger and starts to go up one side, gravity brings it back to safety. And the kid always comes out the water slide in the middle of the bottom, because of that self-correction. And that's essentially what we're doing with the hand. The pinky finger side pushes towards the middle, the thumb pushes towards the middle, and through that wrist snap, everything guides towards the middle of your hand.
This is the one that I personally struggle with. I find when I start missing shots, I find that I'm like, oh, I can identify some tension in my hand, and I need to just like shake it off, be loose, still be wide, although we'll cover some of that later, but be as relaxed as possible while still having the ball in balance.
And from my perspective as a shooter, which was a long time ago, I had to go back to the stone tablets that I wrote my diary on in order to remember this. But mine was the exact opposite, where I had to constantly remind myself to get my hand wider. I had the tendency to just get relaxed and narrow with my hand, and I've got smaller hands. And so I was losing the ability to control the basketball as well as normally, and it was just constantly trying to remind myself comfortably wide, get my hand, like not trying to palm it, but not, and definitely not squeezing it, but I had to get wide.
I like it. Okay, next, what not to do, Dave? Go for it.
Okay, what not to do. Don't focus too much on which finger the ball leaves last.
Like controversial.
It would be really nice if we can control this. Like, this would be fantastic if we could. But just think of how few shots you shoot exactly the way that you want. Like, I don't shoot as much anymore, and so I spent 100 free throws. I had to record some video for some code that we're writing, and so I was just recording myself shooting, and I haven't shot 100 shots in a row in a long time. And so I just use it as like, I'm going to count like how many of these actually feel good. And now I'm out of practice, but there was a very small percentage of shots where I'm like, that was great. That was exactly what I was tending to do. But there were still a bunch of shots where I'm like, that was not ideal, but I adjusted my body. The shooter's body is amazing for its ability to be slightly out of position, inherently know how it's out of position, and then just make the smallest adjustment, just pushing a little bit more with one side of the hand or pushing a little bit harder and correcting the potential mistake. And that always has to happen. And so through the research that we did on the spin axis and release quality, we got to see in slow motion how the ball leaves a lot of players' hands, and the finger that the ball leaves last, the course of the ball was already determined. There was no deviation in those last 2 frames of video because the ball left the middle finger instead of the index finger. The ball continued to go in whatever direction it was going.
I had an experience last Thursday night where I hit a few in a row. The third one felt horrible coming off, to the point where I said, ugh, as it came out of my hand. It went in. It was completely on the right side of the hoop, like it was very much went in the right side, but felt so terrible. But clearly my body adjusted through somewhere between set point and finish to give it a chance to go in. You know, it's nothing to do with the right finger.
And tell me the truth. In you as a shooter, how often do you feel like you'll shoot a shot and say, not my best, but I also know it's going in?
So on the flip side, like 1 out of 5 feels great, like feels really good, like pured it. And then somewhere in that other 4, like probably 1 is going in and wasn't optimal.
So about half are good enough. Is that what you're saying?
5. 25% are good enough. 20% are perfect, and then the other 55, 60%, I think, is how my brain did that. Nope. 40% are good enough to perfect, and then the rest are not going in.
Okay. Yeah. So I wouldn't, as a coach, don't get hung up on which finger the ball leaves last, but please get hung up on supporting both sides of the ball evenly out of the set point. Like that's where I focus my attention. We don't control the release. Or we don't control it perfectly. So I don't try to overcoach that. I coach the set point where let's try and get as close to the middle of the ball with the middle of our hand as we possibly can and make a positive move towards the rim. That's where I spend the bulk of my attention instead.
I think, Dave, I've told this story once before, but the first time I did isolation drill, you made me do it in front of like 40 kids in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And I was still playing at that point, and I was shocked when I got to the set point and removed my guide hand and stayed there for 3 seconds, how unstable the ball was. Even though I was like, I'm a pretty good shooter right now, that was still a weakness for me, that I wasn't supporting the middle of the ball kind of at the set point, or I wasn't doing it very well anyway.
So this simple position was hard for you to be in control of?
Yes.
Yeah. And so many kids get scared by that. We're like, this is hard. I know. It feels weird to do this simple thing because you're so used to doing something complicated. And so if we can put more time into learning to do the simple thing instead of the complicated thing, I think we have a chance to improve dramatically. But yeah, it's funny how all that works.
Super simple, which again, at the end of the day, like we tend to make it harder than it is a lot of the time, I think, right?
Yeah, my golf game would prove that.
I'm going to hit a draw into the screen. Oh yeah, you hit a draw well? No, not at all.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and we'll get into the next what not to do.
Hey there, basketball fans. Coach Dave Love here with an exciting opportunity to revolutionize your shooting game. Introducing my exclusive shot development systems, Pure Release, Consistency and Balance, and Fluidity and Arc. Each system is designed to target key aspects of your shooting technique, transforming you into a more effective player on the court. Pure Release focuses on perfecting your shot release. Consistency and Balance enhances your stability and accuracy, and Fluidity and Arc works on your ball path and trajectory of your shot. Find out the drills and progressions that I use with my NBA players to improve these important habits. Can't decide which one to choose? No worries, grab the bundle and get all 3 systems at a fantastic value. It's a complete package to elevate every part of your shooting game. And there's a special deal for all my podcast listeners. Use the promo code PODCAST20 at checkout to save 20% on any of the shot development systems. Don't miss this chance to train like the pros. Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store and take your first step towards shooting success. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store.
All right, welcome back. Coach Dave. For first-time listeners of the show, what we do, we just had a timeout, and so right now we have to run an after timeout, or an ATO, where we put 24 up on the thought clock, and Coach Dave has to give us a concise look at an important thing we talked about in the last segment.
Biggest thing I want people to take out of the last segment is don't squeeze the basketball. Make the shape of the ball with your hand, and then get your hand in the right position as you start to accelerate the ball. And if you can do that, your hand can remain passive and push the ball push both sides of the ball evenly towards the target.
You had a good look, and then you made 3 extra passes, and we got a good look again. So that's great.
Oh man, there were 3 extra passes. I felt like that was reasonably concise.
It was good.
I'm terrible at this.
No, you're good. You had the look, and you gave it up. We got another good look. Okay, Dave, we're going to go the next what not to do with a shooting hand.
What not to do. I had trouble coming up with a word or phrase to describe this, so I'm going to have to explain this one. I wrote down for you, don't intentionally pinch your finger. So what I mean by that is, if you're listening to the podcast, I'll try and describe it, or you can go to YouTube to watch. Um, we want to make the shape of the ball with our hand, and then the pinching would be like if your pointer finger comes significantly through, so your fingers are no longer in a line, or your middle finger goes down, and it's like um, you're you've changed the line of one finger. You push excessively with one finger. What would be a good simple way of saying that?
Uh,
Pushing.
yeah, pushing with one finger, um, pushing exponentially more force with with a single finger on the hand.
Yeah. So those are the little adjustments that you'll have to make from shot to shot, as we talked about in the previous segment. But we don't want to build that as our default setting. That basically takes the water slide that the kid was going down, and the self-correcting mechanism that happens, and at the end of it having a giant peak. And now you're just sending the kid out of the water slide top, which, as I'm now picturing this, super funny.
Super funny.
Yeah.
Not my kid.
Yeah. I didn't like the kid, so
Yeah.
I'm laughing. But
little Bobby.
We take it, and we did take the middle of the slide, and we just melt the plastic and lift the middle up, so now it becomes a ramp that spews the kid out one side or the other. And it will not be a comfortable landing for them, but we don't want to do that version of that with a shot.
So if you have a player who's doing that, so let's spend just 2 minutes here. How are you trying to fix something like that? Is this an external cue that we're trying to find?
God, you're getting good. Yeah, like a lot of people will say, like, "Hey, coach, give me a drill to work on this." Like, there's no drill. Like, it's just, this is a shooting motion. Ultimately, all of our drills should be a shooting motion. And a lot of the quote unquote drills, borderline on task decomposition. And so we're really trying to just find a phrase that makes sense to the shooter's brain, and attach a feeling to it. Like, this is what it feels like. I want you to imagine that you are. So I'll just say to a player, like, don't the wiffle ball scoop is what I come back to, because it makes sense to so many people, and then I adjust from there. But like, don't put a twig in the wiffle ball scoop that changes the way that the ball comes out at the end. I don't know if it makes perfect sense in my brain.
I'm picturing a hammer in the back of a gun that's in the wiffle ball that's like on the way out. The hammer is the last thing to hit it, even though it's nice funneling up through the wiffle, and the hammer hits it on the last thing.
Right.
Which makes sense to my brain.
If the hammer hits right in the middle, we're going to be okay, or at least it's going to go online. And if the hammer hits the one side more than the other, now the ball's firing off in the opposite direction too much.
Got it. Okay, so find if you have a player who's doing this, find a good external cue for them that can help them understand what they need to be doing. Absolutely love that.
Yeah. So, right. And to guide them towards just like, sorry, I'm going to lead myself into the flip side of this. So we've given what not to do. Don't pinch your finger. What do we want to do? Said it now a couple of times. Make the shape of the basketball, and then stay within the shape of the ball, where your fingers essentially end up in the curve of the circumference of the ball. Is that circumference?
Circumference.
For some reason, I've been like mixing up circumference, diameter, radius lately. But
radius is a quarter, diameter is the line straight through, and circumference is all the way around.
Well, I know that now, Matthew.
Remember grade 10 physics or geometry, Dave? Come on. That was a couple years ago. Okay, so this is actually a really good lead into the next what not to do. So I'm making the shape of the ball, I'm keeping the shake to the ball, but what should I not do while I'm doing this?
Don't overstress the I want the ball off the palm, or Steph Curry has the ball in his palm, you should have the ball in your palm too. I don't think that's the important part. I don't want you to overstress the ball can't touch the palm of your hand. That will be case by case basis for each player. Instead, what should we focus our energy on? I would rather you focus your energy on getting the weight of the ball in the fingers. I think that's the idea that we should have been saying when we were saying get the palm off the ball. Obviously, we've seen enough people talk about how Steph doesn't do that, but he's flexible within enough within his wrist that he can have the ball touching the palm of his hand, but still have the center of mass of the ball in his fingers. And what we need to make sure that we're staying away from is the center of mass of the ball over top of the heel of the hand.
So, and, Dave, generally speaking, what happens? What is the result when a player has too much weight on the palm of their hand?
Comes out a little bit more like a knuckleball, like doesn't get rotation. We don't get that funneling action that is the self-correcting mechanism. And then like the biggest thing is if everybody starts like at a set point kind of position with your wrist bent back and the ball around, imaginary ball around your forehead right now, watch as you snap your wrist how much distance your fingers cover. My fingers are moving several inches and moving quickly. Well, that's a lot more force. And what happens is, so if we got the weight of the ball in our fingers, we're applying a lot more force to the basketball. If we've got the weight of the ball in the heel of our hand, as we snap our wrist, the heel of our hand barely moves. And so we're not applying the amount of force that we could potentially give to the basketball. So it either comes out with a knuckleball without that self-correcting mechanism, or players struggle with range, and then also could end up with their hand relaxing, getting more on the back of the basketball. And sometimes it's a chicken and the egg, where like, are they getting the palm or the ball in the heel of their hand, which is allowing their hand to relax, or is their hand inflexible, forcing the ball to be in the heel of their hand? Case by case basis for each player, but no matter what, we want to try and avoid that as much as we can and get the weight of the ball in the fingers.
You told a story last week about you and your mentor standing watching young Bradley Beal, and he said the words, "The ball leaves his hand so well," and that was a moment for you, and so on and so forth. The converse of this, the ball not leaving his hand well, I found this to be when I see somebody and the ball doesn't seem to leave his hand well, and I can't really figure out what it is, this has been sort of a culprit in a sort of like a disproportionate amount of the time for me anyway.
Having the ball in the heel
palm,
of the hand,
palm, or just a little too far, weight just a little too far forward. That's kind of been I think for in my very small sample size of experience here.
Yeah, well, and kind of related. I haven't necessarily personally, I don't want to take away from what you've noticed of trying to yes and this in a different way. I haven't personally noticed it being disproportionate or proportional. But I have noticed I go through waves where you're working with a certain player who has a certain habit, and then that ends up being what you see more in other people. And I go through just like, this is my primary guy that I'm working with, and so I'm devising plans to kind of improve that habit. And because you get so focused on that idea, you see other people doing it more. And are they actually doing it more? I would argue, hopefully they are. Maybe I'm just more aware of it than I normally normally am, but I can totally relate to what you're saying with like oh yeah, you notice it with one person, and then it's all you buy a new car, and all of a sudden you see, oh, it's like everybody copied me. No, you're just more aware of this new brand of car than you have been before.
My favorite example of this is you hear a new word, and then like 10 minutes later or a day later or a week later, you're like, man, I swear I've never heard that word before. Sorry, you just gave me a 30-second timeout motion.
20-second timeout, but yes. My wife is the opposite of that. We have an ongoing family joke. I hope she doesn't listen to the podcast. She barely listens to me anyways. Who am I kidding? But it might get back to her in some way. I have a love of a few words in the English language, which I just think are either hilarious or fun to say. And one of the words that I love is penultimate, the second to last. And so I would slip it into conversation, and it doesn't come up very often. It's hard to find a way to slip in second to last. But when I could, every 3 or 4 months, I'd slip in penultimate, and my wife would say, "What does that mean?" Like every 3 months, what does that mean? I'm like, it means second to last. And my kids have now heard it 6 times in the last year or a year and a half. And now they know what it means. And they also know mommy never remembers it. So now we're 10 years into the joke. And when I say penultimate, my daughters will go, "What does that mean? I've never heard that before." To poke fun at my wife, and which she loves. She takes it so well. She loves being teased. But yeah, sorry, I forget even what you said, but I thought.
I love the family bit. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Commercial break time?
Absolutely, fire it up.
Hey basketball fans, Coach Dave Love here with an exclusive offer just for you, my personalized video shot analysis. Imagine having an NBA shooting coach analyze your shooting form, just like I do for the pros. That's exactly what you'll get with my video shot analysis. Here's how it works. You send me a video of your shot and I'll break it down frame by frame. I'll pinpoint your strengths and identify the areas of improvement and give you tailored advice to take your shot to the next level. You'll receive a comprehensive analysis designed just for you. Whether you're a beginner or an aspiring pro, my feedback will help you shoot with confidence and precision. It isn't just feedback, it's a game changer. With my video shot analysis, you're not just practicing, you're evolving, and every single shot counts. Ready to transform your game? Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store to learn more and get started. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store and look for video shot analysis.
All right, welcome back. Coach, 24 up on the thought clock. Give us an ATO looking at an important thing we talked about in the last segment.
I'm going to go back to the penultimate thing that we had talked about.
Love
as a
it.
callback, and just say, remind you, don't pinch your finger. Don't push more with one finger than the others. We want to try and push evenly with both, with all fingers through the ball.
Crushed it. Concise, direct. Absolutely love it. All right, Coach Dave, we have one more what not to do, and then a few whats. And we're not really going to have hammer action today. So I want to get your brain churning on like a practical coaching thing that maybe we can get to for that. So just that's a little bit of priming for your subconscious.
No, I appreciate that. Let's try and figure out a way to, maybe it's an unorthodox hammer action, but it's let's try and figure out a way. So, okay, what not to do, last what not to do. Don't get fixated on the middle of your hand, whatever you believe that to be, on a certain part of the ball and think that's the middle of the ball. I see so many kids at the clinics as I try to explain the middle of the basketball, which is a bit of an abstract concept. And they say like, okay, I was told to put my finger on the nozzle or on the valve or on the black dot where we put the air on the ball. And I'll try and explain to them, right now, that nozzle on the top of the basketball, that's the middle of the ball. And then I'll just rotate the ball 5 degrees. I'm like, now it's not. And rotate it 5 more. Now it's not. Now it's not. Now it's not. Until it gets to the bottom of the ball. And now I'll say, now it is again. and then rotated around all the degrees where now it's not. So many players, so many young players will say, "Oh, I don't like index finger on the middle of the basketball. I like having my middle finger on them," and they put their middle finger on the nozzle. And then I say, "Okay, put the ball up at your set point." They put the ball up at the set point, and their index fingers on the bottom of the ball, which is the middle at that point. The L in Wilson, or the Jerry West logo on the NBA basketball, or the Val, those sometimes can be the middle of the ball, but very often are not. And it's an abstract concept, as I said. Like, what is the middle of the ball? The best explanation I've come up with is illuminate like a laser wall between the middle of your body and the middle of the hoop, and put the ball on that laser. The laser wall, the part of the ball that the laser is illuminating, that's the middle. And we want to try and get underneath the center of the basketball with the center of our hand. And so many kids misinterpret the nozzle of the basketball.
That is an excellent external cue. And I do have a question about this. Like, personally, I am a seam finder. Like, when the ball is coming to me, it's not something I'm thinking about, but I guess I've been doing it forever. I find the seam just about every time. Is that a negative thing? Is that something like, it's not like giving me a geography of where I'm supposed to be, like the middle of the ball is the middle of the seam, like, talk to me about seam finders.
Wonderful luxury that if you have the time to do it and you can build the skill of doing it quickly, which I think a lot of us do it unconsciously. Like, I consciously went to see like how quickly I could do that, like just spinning the ball to myself. And man, I haven't played in forever, and I'm still pretty good at that little skill that I didn't even realize I had. So if you can become more comfortable just as you're catching the basketball, please, by all means, do that. I've got no problem with you becoming more comfortable. You have to understand that other than your comfort, how you're holding the seams has no additional value. Like, it's not going to go in more physically because you've held it a certain way. It's not going to spin better or not curve. If it is curving the air, it's going to curve no matter how you are gripping the seams. It's strictly a comfort thing. Then you just have to be aware, if that takes you a tenth of a second or a quarter of a second, sometimes you don't have that time. And so you just be okay with the fact that off a dribble pickup, you're probably not going to be able to seam the ball.
Well, it's a good thing because I never shoot off the dribble, so that's great. I had a player a couple of years ago who was like, "Why are you doing that?" And I was like, "Why doing what?" He's like, "You're catching the ball out here, like sideways." I was like, "What do you mean?" And we were just shooting around or whatever, getting some reps in. And so it's something I didn't notice until like 3 or 4 years ago, that I'm catching the ball on the seams, whatever way that the spin of the ball is going, I'm trying to catch it. And I'd never really noticed that. Like, what a weird little quirk, I guess. That
when I discovered that we catch the ball differently is when working with Tristan Thompson, when he was switching hands, and he because there was no blueprint for how do you learn to shoot the ball with your next hand. As Tristan said in a Sports Illustrated article, he's like, we were the blueprint. We were the ones figuring this out. And one of the things that we discovered a little later than I would have wished was that, it's not just learning to shoot the ball right-handed. We had to learn to shoot the ball right-footed as well. And then we had to also learn to catch the ball right-handed, because there was one little shot. It was like a 12-foot jump shot in the paint. And as I remember it, he missed it by 3 feet.
No.
Like it was the ugliest shot that I think I've ever seen, where it, like, everybody kind of looks at each other like, what the heck happened there? And we all knew something disastrous had happened, but we didn't really know what. And then we're watching the video. I'm like, oh my God, he caught it left-handed. He caught it because 3 months ago, he was left-handed.
Oh.
And if you think about like how I'll do it as a righty. This is how I would catch the ball as a right hand. Now, if I don't adjust my hands and then I try to get my left hand underneath, like, they are not mirror images of each other, where it's just like, here, same. No, it's completely different. And he either had to make a gigantic move to adjust for the catch or be wildly out of position. And I think, unfortunately, he found no man's land between those two bad choices. And so it's like, okay, poop. Well, we better be working on catching the ball as a right-handed shooter now. And so that became a part of our routine.
I feel like there are two guys that play for the team that you worked for last year that are such freaks of nature with the hand-eye coordination that even wildly out of position, it still has a chance. But those guys are like, I would call them like bar sports elites, just like any hand-eye coordination little game, they're just going to absolutely crush, which is maddening. But anyway, that's...
So let's put a term on this. They should be practicing by freeing degrees of freedom. That right now they have such control over their motor pattern that we can introduce variability to give them more options. We can free degrees of freedom. Whereas with a weak shooter, the guys that I historically work at, they already have too many ineffective movement patterns. We need to start to freeze some degrees of freedom to guide them towards something that's more effective. And then as they start to explore around that more effective movement pattern, then we start to free degrees of freedom from there. So there's a little explanation of some of the words or terms that we might see in a research paper as I understand them. Now, tell me how I got these wrong, please, people that are actual experts in this.
I definitely didn't know the inverse of freezing degrees of freedom as freeing degrees of freedom. So thank you for explaining that. There's this great video on YouTube of Baron Davis taking awful off-balance layups in a workout, which are actually things that he does in a game that would, I think, qualify for that freeing degrees of freedom, where he's just like trying stuff and scooping and hook shots and off-balance everything's, and which is actually decent work for him at that time, where that was sort of in his bag.
Yeah. And I had this conversation today with one of the coaches for the team that I'm working with right now, that we talked about exactly this. And I said, like, if we're working on finishing, it should never be a cookie cutter. It should be like as creative as we can make it. They're already good at the cookie cutter, and the cookie cutter never happens. We should probably be finding realistic ways to help them be creative, because those are the shots that they actually get in games. And so yeah, just to support the point that you're trying to make there.
It just as a super kind of one continuation note on that, that is specifically a skill that I struggle with coaching, because to have the pad and give force and to make things difficult is one thing, but to do it safely is another thing. And I feel like I can do that because I've been in those situations. I know what it's like to be off balance and vulnerable. And even still, there's been a couple of times where it'll happen. I'll be like, ooh, like that was a little unsafe. And, my starting center just like took a tumble. And anyway, coaching is hard.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, making it messy in a safe way is like, I'm very aware of where my feet are when they're in the air, and trying to get your feet out of the way. And I don't mind so much hitting a guy with my arm on their arm, but God, please do not land on my foot. And
Terrifying.
Unfortunately, I'm on the ground far sooner than they are. And I have a good half second to get my feet out of the way.
And I've landed and they're still going up.
Yeah, they're still rising.
Okay, Dave, we thank you for that great tangent. I think that's valuable. There's some valuable stuff in there. So you have two more what to do's with the shooting hand before we finish here. Let's go through those.
Think of nice, neat, don't do this and not repeat myself. So, and I think we've touched on both of these. So thumb wide, I see a lot of people, they might have their fingers wide, but their thumb gets, shooting hand thumb gets a little bit narrow. That shooting hand thumb is often overlooked. We need to make sure that is comfortably spread out. Not necessarily in an L, but just like at least kind of mirroring the angle of the pinky. And if I'm watching a player from the front, I want to kind of see that the thumb is supporting the one side of the ball about the same amount that the pinky is supporting the other side of the ball. So wide thumb will be one. And then I think this is the most under-taught thing. I get hyper fixated on the index finger, the pointer finger, assuming that's the middle of the grip, which it is for 95% of players, being parallel to the target line at the set point and then staying parallel to the target line. I think that is just about everything in shooting. And I don't really hear a lot of other people talking about. They talk about the elbow, but the elbow's not touching the basketball. The angle of the finger to me is critical.
So when you're talking about fixation on, so earlier you said don't be fixated on what finger the ball is coming off. However, it is important for the index finger being the middle of your hand for most people to be on the middle of the ball. So that is an important thing to fixate on at the set point, not on the release piece.
Right. The position of it underneath the center of the basketball, but at an angle parallel to the target line where it's going to stay on the middle of the ball as a player snaps through. If your finger is on an angle, it's going to be snapping across the ball. And you're going to start off probably applying force to one side of the ball and then finish applying force on the other side, which is essentially how somebody would throw a curveball.
The LeBron James effect.
Yes, yeah, which will, the snapping across the ball will increase the positive or negative EZ rotation. I love it. I know you love it when I talk nerdy.
Talk nerdy
and pushing one side of the ball is going to increase the positive or negative EY rotation of the ball.
Most excellent.
You probably have no idea what I'm talking about, listener, and that's okay. Is it? I think it might be on one of my blogs on release quality, sort of an explanation of what we might be talking about there. Don't quote me on if it's on that blog, but I think it's on one of them.
And as always, we'll be diving into these. We've done a few short shot metrics overviews in the last few weeks, and we will be diving deeper as the book is released and as we as more data comes out, because Dave is still doing all the data things. Okay, the last thing I want to do, Dave. So again, I don't know if we have a nice little box to tie a bow or a nice little bow to tie on this, but we generally do something called hammer action, where we hammer home an actionable piece of advice from this episode. And really, all of the what to do's are actionable, sort of easier actionable things. So from a priority ranking, if I'm teaching a group of people for the first time, is there one of these what to do that you're just like, this is the most important thing, and if we can't do the other 8 things, focus on this one thing?
Middle of the hand, underneath the middle of the ball, parallel to the target line. And like, as you were starting to talk there, I was thinking, like, I feel like my hammer action is just going to be focus on the set point, not the release.
That's so succinct.
But yeah, the way that you were asking the question, like the position of the pointer finger, assuming that's the middle of their hand, underneath the middle of the ball, parallel to the target line, at the set point is, to me, like the great corrector in shooting. It solves so many other potential problems.
I love how concise your version was, though. Focus on the set point, not the release, is such an easy little wrapped up in a bow that a coach can take with them. And that might mean a different thing to them than going through the 8 different what ifs, but it gives them a really great starting place, I think.
Perfect. I'm glad you said that, Matthew. Thank you. You're such a good person.
Listen, stop it. Coach Dave, as always, you're a delight. Really appreciate the time. As a listener, if you stuck with us to the end, we appreciate you. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. It all really helps. Coach Dave, where can the people find you if they want to find more of your material?
On my newsletter, coachdavelove.com, on Instagram and Twitter, Coach Dave Love. And I just want to compliment a couple of people have said in my life recently, Matt's getting pretty good. And so just, I think you and I have kind of talked about it, but other people are noticing that Matt is really starting to understand the things that we're talking about, which gives me hope that the regular listeners are starting to really understand as well. So thank you.
No, listen, thank you. My players have asked me a number of questions about how they should be training and how they should be challenging themselves. And I have sort of formed answers for them, which is way more than I had previously. And just like the way that I'm trying to get them to work on little things in their own time is about pushing boundaries and challenge point. And that's a really fun thing. So yeah, I really appreciate it. We're almost at 52 episodes here. So it's almost been a year and appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah. We, you mentioned challenge point. I'll just finish on this. We just had a coaches meeting today, and it was essentially about the challenge point and trying to find creative, variable ways to get players practicing in the challenge point more often. So just know, like, this simple idea, I think, of all the skill acquisition ideas, this is the thing that people should be first aware of, and constantly going back to paying attention to how they're using the other ideas in order to get in the challenge point. Like, that's the purpose of everything to me.
I hope you will share some of those things that were talked about in the meetings with me off the air. Coach Dave, thanks again for your time. I am Matt Robertson. You can find me on LinkedIn or on X at Coach Matty Rob. Thanks for sticking with us to the end, and see us next week.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com, and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.